Welcome to it. Another edition of the Hockey Talk Show. Phone number is on the screen there. It's 631-438-1768. 631-438-1768. Streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. And, of course, on the podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and all the rest. TuneIn Radio. Can't mention one of them. Welcome to the Hockey Talk Show. We'll be taking your phone calls today on the show. You can see it in the title description there on Facebook and YouTube. Quebec. Are they getting the Ottawa Senators? We'll have to wait and see. Finally, there's a hockey pundit who spoke out and said, you got to send a team there. And it's a very big one and well respected. We talked about this on the show prior. Hockey pundits don't exactly like to talk a lot against the National Hockey League. Not that this is something that is particularly against the National Hockey League, but the league certainly wouldn't like losing a team or having them relocate anywhere. That's not usually good for a pro sports league. It's not a sign of stability or anything else like that. So we'll have to wait and see what becomes of the Ottawa Senators. We're going to tackle that first. Some of the other things that we're going to get into here, the NHL, well, I shouldn't say the NHL. It's the Hockey Hall of Fame inductions today. I want to talk about Paul Kariya a little bit. I want to talk about goalie. I want to talk about referee cams. And I want to talk about the fact that Vegas continues to be a legitimate contender, and they're a good team, and we got to wait and see what's going on with the Vegas Golden Knights. But I like what they're doing over there in Vegas. Why this team is different than any other team in the history of NHL expansion. We'll get into all of that and more on this episode of the Hockey Talk Show. But again, your calls at 631-438-1768. If you'd like to chime in, that's 631-438-1768. You can visit us, hockeytalkshow.com. And, of course, you can tweet, Instagram, or Facebook us. We're at Hockey Talk Show. That's at Hockey Talk Show. Let's talk about my man, Don Cherry. Came out and spoke up, laying down the cards, what's what with the Ottawa Senators. Now, if you're a fan of the Ottawa Senators, look, I don't think there's anything worse than losing your hockey team. I worked for the New York Islanders, huge fan of the New York Islanders, when we didn't have a home for the New York Islanders, and we didn't really know there because the local politicians on Long Island weren't going to build a Coliseum, weren't going to refurb the Coliseum. All this stuff was going on. And then you had Kansas City popping up, and now all of a sudden all these cities are like, hey, we'll take the Islanders. It's devastating to think about. It's really devastating to think about. So don't think that I'm getting any pleasure out of this, Ottawa Senators fans. It's just that we got to talk about what's what. And the fact remains on the table that you have a team in Canada who is so hockey crazy that can't sell tickets, not only during the regular season. I mean, we're not just talking about, Tuesday versus the Florida Panthers here. We're talking about playoff games. Now, something that doesn't really get, Tampa's got a pretty big building, actually. The Garden can seat 20,000. Now, is that for hockey, though? I don't know. Let's see here. Hockey seating. There's definitely some manager over at the Pepsi Center that's all like, hey, let's squeeze an extra seat in here somewhere. This way we can just top Madison Square Garden. Wouldn't that be something? All right, the Bell Center is number one, 21,288. Followed by, Quicken Loans Arena, which is where the Cavaliers play. There's no NHL team there. Little Caesars seats 20,000. United Center at 19. Wells Fargo. The Saddle Dome. All right, let's get all the way down here. The Canadian Tire Center, where the Ottawa Senators play, 18,572. That is literally 15th in the NHL, even though Cleveland won in there. All right, so there's a couple of AHL ones in here. So let's say about kind of midway through. I think, who is it? Winnipeg that has the least? Winnipeg, I think, is the smallest arena in the National Hockey League right now. Let me see. 15,294. And the Islanders at the Barclays Center, 15,813 is the second smallest. And you're like, you're thinking about, well, what was the Coliseum? 16,234. So it wasn't that much bigger, roughly 400 seats larger at the Nassau Coliseum. So even though they moved over to the Barclays Center and they lost a whole bunch of seats, still just about 400 less than what the Coliseum would have been. But my point about bringing this all up is this. The Canadian Tire Center is a big building to fill. So I'm not entirely surprised that they're having a little trouble filling an 18,000 seat arena. The troubling part about it is, though, it's the Ottawa Senators. I mean, it's a Canadian, market. I, for the life of me, can't understand why they can't sell these games out. And again, it's not like the team stinks. The Ottawa Senators have been in contention for a number of years now. Why can't they get this building sold out? To have seats available in a Canadian market for a playoff game, that is an embarrassment. That is beyond an embarrassment. And if you're sitting there watching this, thanks, by the way. If you're sitting there watching this and you're thinking to yourself, why haven't I ever heard of this before? It's because the National Hockey League does not want this discussed. You'll see it. You'll see the issues skirted every now and then. For those hockey pundits or reporters that still feel the need to have a little bit of journalistic integrity, which there's not a lot, but there are some that still feel the need to, they'll write a piece about this every now and then. You'll sort of kind of see it. But they keep it very much to a minimum. And they don't want to hurt the sport that they're covering. I get that that's a part of it. Again, there's no grand conspiracy theory here. That the NHL is running all the NHL media. They're not. Again, you don't want to hurt the sport that you're covering. I don't want to hurt the Ottawa Senators. I don't want to hurt the National Hockey League, but the facts are the facts. And the fact is that this building can't sell. So imagine my surprise when Don Cherry, who's got a huge audience up in Canada, brought this to fruition. I was surprised. Now, nobody is going to tell Don Cherry what to say. He's reached that status where he can say whatever the hell he wants and nobody's going to tell him otherwise. Not Gary Bettman, not, you name the powerful owner in the National Hockey League. Nobody's going to come around and be like, get that guy off the air. It's not going to happen with Don Cherry. But over the weekend, he brought up the Ottawa Senators, and he was talking about the fact that they need to be moved. If they can't get an arena downtown, that's what's key for this. They need to get an arena. They've been talking about this a lot. There's been some rumblings. There's a city council meeting that's supposedly getting ready to take place. And they're going to be deciding on whether or not they're going to give them an arena. If you're the Ottawa City Council or whomever, how can you not give the National Hockey League whatever it is you want? Look at Winnipeg. Look at Quebec. These teams left 20 some odd years ago, and the fans are still hurting there. The fans are still hurting. Obviously not in Winnipeg. They got the Jets back, but still, it's not something that you get over. It's like getting dumped by a significant other. Even if they come back, you're excited, but then after a while, you're like, hey, I'm still pissed you left. Like, I haven't gotten over that yet. Like, I'm thrilled you're back. This is great. This is so much better than being alone. But what a jerk, like that kind of deal. I know this is queued up exactly right, but here's some of Don Cherry's comments from over the weekend. Let's see here.
Watch this here. He won 80% of his draws today. This guy is this something. And I've always said every time the...
All right, let me give you a little substance here. They're talking about Matt Duchene. He's talking about Matt Duchene winning a bunch of face-offs, the fact that, he's going to be a big help for the Ottawa Senators, so on and so forth. Don Cherry mentioned that he had coached Duchene in a Young Stars game. Don Cherry is one of the coaches in that typically. So he's just going over his praise for Matt Duchene.
He can skate. Remember I used to say, this guy's the best skater in the league, and why he isn't playing center is beyond me. And Boucher, pretty smart guy, put him at center, and he's going to thrive. Game breaker. and he'll say he's a friend. If they don't put an arena downtown, they're gone. I think they're just hanging on here in Ottawa, not drawn out with a great team like that. They're not drawn out with that team. I say they're gone, and I say they go to Quebec.
Quebec. I love the way Canadians talk. I still am obsessed with the way Canadians say Detroit. They don't say Detroit like we say in the States. They say Detroit. There is an I before that T. I'm not going to argue with that. There is an I before that T. I love everything that Don Cherry is saying here. He's calling this out. He's making a point. By the way, Ottawa, if you lose your team 5 years from now, you could thank Don Cherry for bringing this up at this point. Because if Don Cherry talks about it, it comes to the forefront. Now, I don't expect TSN, Sportsnet, ESPN to really pick this up. ESPN a little bit more so because what do they care if a team in Canada moves? But it's a big deal. It's a big deal to have one of the big hockey pundits finally point out the issue that nobody really wants to talk about. Now, look, we know that there are some struggles with some of the franchises in the National Hockey League. The Florida Panthers can't draw. We all know the issues with the Arizona Coyotes over the years, but it's not uncommon for, you hear rumblings about Carolina, and Carolina's not drawing now. Well, Carolina's not that good, but they won a Stanley Cup. You hear these rumblings all the time. Let's not forget that before Sidney Crosby was drafted as a Pittsburgh Penguin, there was a time when the Penguins were a threat to leave Pittsburgh. Remember the guy with the BlackBerry guy? I forget. He was going to buy the Penguins. They thought they had a suitor there. And then he started talking all this garbage about, well, I'm going to move him to, where I forget where he was going to put him. What was his name? Something with a B. Yeah, he tried to buy like 3 franchises. And the National Hockey League just kept on blocking him. But Basile, I think it was. That was a long time ago now. I don't really remember. But there's always rumblings of teams being moved and all that kind of stuff. That's why Paul Newman had such a hard time of figuring out who his owner was. The Charlestown Chiefs owner. It was difficult. But the point is that, all really bad Paul Newman jokes aside, salad dressing. The point is this, that when you have, Florida is a non-traditional market. Let's not forget the Ottawa Senators were one of the or the Ottawa whoever, 1926, one of the first years. Their name is all the way up there on top of that Stanley Cup, Ottawa. This is such a big deal because they're a Canadian team. The Florida Panthers not selling out with a historically bad team the last few years is not a shock. Trying to sell Arizona on a franchise for the last several years and them going through a long stretch of period of time of not being good is not a shock. Guys, there's no secret here. If the team is good, the market is strong. And that's it. The New York Rangers may be able to go through 6 really crummy seasons. You're not going to have much of an issue keeping the New York Rangers in the National Hockey League. But when the Florida Panthers struggle or the Carolina Hurricanes struggle, and Carolina is a great example of, you can struggle in a non-traditional market even after winning a cup and you're still not going to have people showing up. You've got to be exciting. Look at the Nashville Predators right now. Is there anybody in Nashville that's not wearing that yellow and blue for the Nashville Predators? They were insane with it last year. Their tickets this year are through the roof, selling better than they were in years past. It's worked. Now, if they can maintain this, which David Boyle clearly wants to, that's why I picked up Kyle Turris, they're going to be just fine. Even if 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, they start fading a little bit, you again might start hearing these rumblings. This kind of stuff happens all the time. Strategically, it's important to have these franchises in certain places. Why is Gary Bettman holding on to Arizona so bad? Because Arizona strategically for the league is important. It's important for the league's footprint out west. It's not good enough that you have a team in Los Angeles and Anaheim and San Jose. You need more than that. That's why we have the Vegas Golden Knights now. That's why we have the Arizona Coyotes. Bill Foley is a tremendous guy. He's a fantastic owner. But if he wanted to, put a team in Baltimore, he would not have gotten it this quickly. But he wanted to put a team where the NHL is increasingly interested in keeping their foothold. The reason why Quebec doesn't have a team is because the Ottawa Senators are struggling. Everybody's like, why do they want to give Quebec a team? It's a small market this, it's blah, 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 that. The Winnipeg Jets have proven that all those arguments are just garbage. They're not good arguments. Winnipeg's got a small arena. It doesn't matter. They sell out every single night. You look at any other National Hockey League arena, 12,000, 11,000. They're sitting in 18,000 seat arenas, but 14,000 people are showing up. In Winnipeg, they only have 15,000 seats and 15,000 people show up every single night. It's just, it's better. It's a better market. Winnipeg is a good market for the National Hockey League. They do have corporate support there. They have the things that they need. Would they like a bigger arena? Sure. Would they like would they like certain other things that come with a bigger team like the Chicago Blackhawks or the Toronto Maple Leafs? Sure. Of course they would. But they don't have that. So it's a small market, but there's a ton of interest, so they do well. Again, ticket sales aren't the end-all, be-all. You need corporate sponsorship. You need good TV deals all throughout the region. But Winnipeg does all right. It's an exciting rivalry between Winnipeg and Detroit, so you got that going on. There's a lot of reasons why Winnipeg is good. Quebec can be just as good. But the problem is, and what everybody doesn't want to talk about is, the reason why they don't want to stick an expansion franchise in Quebec is because they can't make Ottawa work. And now you'll have, a small franchise and another struggling franchise. They've got to figure out the Ottawa thing. That being said, this is not like a trade deadline acquisition. This is not like I got to improve my team and I have a couple of months to do so. The National Hockey League moves extremely slow, as it should. You don't want to be moving franchises around every 10 seasons. That doesn't look good for your overall ecosystem. Remember, they have advertisers. They're a business. They have to maintain a healthy structure, but more importantly, almost, is appear to be totally healthy. You know what I'm saying? They don't want these things being brought up to the forefront. So they have to figure out Ottawa first of all. Now, the interesting case here is Ottawa's really good. As Don Cherry says, if they can't fill the building with this team, well, then how the hell are they going to fill the building? A lot of people believe, and I'm willing to buy into it because it's Canada, for the love of Pete and Gordy. A lot of people believe if they had a downtown location that was closer to the heart, every downtown location does well. If they had a downtown location, that would be a lot better for the Ottawa Senators. Let's see how it plays out. If it is, can you get a Quebec Nordiques? Well, I think so, but I think you're looking at a really, really long time till you can judge if Ottawa is good or not. Because Ottawa and the sales problem hasn't been an issue from day one, but it certainly has been an issue for a long time. So you need to really fill that building up for a long time if you want to prove it works. I don't think that the National Hockey League wants to be in a scenario, however, where you have just built a new building for the Ottawa Senators downtown, and then 5 years later you move them to Quebec. But there is, as Don Cherry points out, an interesting precipice here where if you can't get the downtown arena going, then you know what? Move this team to Quebec. Now, is he saying that logistically out of, taking everything into account? No, I think he's saying it as Don Cherry, the Canadian who wants to see a team in Quebec, who is sick and tired of not having a Quebec Nordiques, which is certainly understandable. We'll back it up a little bit. Open phone lines for you if you want to talk about new National Hockey League teams. By the way, we're going to take this take this a step further and get into the possibility of expansion and some other teams. Where you'd like to see a team, what you think about the Ottawa Senators leaving, anything you want to talk about on the phone lines at 631-438-1768. That's 631-438-1768. Don Cherry.
Town, they're gone. I think they're just hanging on here in Ottawa, not drawn out with a great team like that. They're not drawn out with that team. I say they're gone, and I say they go to Quebec. And I know Quebec saying, keep quiet, it'll be perfect. You've got a French coach, you've got a French general manager, you got a lot of French guys. It'll be perfect moved in there. Gary, that's where they should go. It's a Canadian team. If they go, if the councilman doesn't vote downtown.
Move Florida or move Arizona, move somebody else.
I don't want him to leave Ottawa, but if they're not drawn, why the heck should he stay there?
All good points. I also do like the way Don Cherry put the little Don Cherry on top by saying Gary, like specifically, like that to me, that's like specifically like Gary Bettman. Like I'm clearly talking about you here, you know? I mean, Don Cherry, you know, what else can you say about the guy? He's doing what he can. Talking about Quebec saying, no, be quiet. Don't ruin it. We're going to get a team. It's going to be great. Don't bring too much attention to it. What's his name? His co-host there talking about, please move Florida, move Arizona first. I don't foresee the league wanting to lose a U.S. market. The National Hockey League already had to swallow the fact that they had to lose the Atlanta Thrashers. I think the writing was on the wall there. I think there was a couple of things that were different. Writing was on the wall there. It was the second time a franchise in that city was failing. You had an ownership group that wanted to move them to Winnipeg quickly and could get the deal done very fast. You had an owner with the Thrashers that was just flat out going to, you know, like somebody whose car stalls out, just leave this thing in the middle of the highway during rush hour, which would not have been good for the league. They were already dealing with the Arizona Coyotes situation. You know, the league had to take over one team. You don't want to be doing that for two teams. Certainly the other owners are not going to want to foot the bill for running two franchises. So there were a lot of different things in comparison to the Atlanta situation versus Florida and Arizona. And again, Arizona tends to be really, really super important to the National Hockey League because of its footprint and where it is on the map of the United States of America. You know, they are important to their footprint in the West. Florida, I could see moving, but again, you know, you're dealing with a situation where it's just a massive city down there in Miami. And again, I know they're not in Miami, but you have Miami, you have Hollywood, you have a vibrant state down there in Florida. I mean, if all things go well for the league and it continues to grow and build as it has been, I think one day you're going to be hearing people talk about putting a team in Orlando. You know, Florida is a big state with no, tax, no income tax. And can this be, a New York or metro area? Can this be a California? You know, can Florida be the type of situation where it can maintain more than two franchises? I think that's possible. I do also think it's possible that if the Panthers were going to move, they would move from where they are right now in the Miami area and moving on up the state a little bit there to Orlando. Orlando is a huge family destination, big population, over 2 million people for sure. And you have constant visitors all year long because of Hollywood studios there, Disney and Universal Studios and all that. So I think that a team in Orlando would definitely be, if gun to the head, the National Hockey League has to deal with the Florida Panthers the way they had to deal with the Winnipeg Jets, Atlanta Thrashers. I think they move to Orlando. I don't think that they move them out of state, and I certainly don't think that they put them in Quebec. And if Gary Bettman and the league just went through what they went through to keep the Arizona Coyotes there, they're not going to let them move either. At some point, would they go and say, Uncle? Maybe, but I just don't foresee that happening. 631-438-1768 is the number. 631-438-1768 if you want to call in. Good on Don Cherry for making this a big deal, for calling out Gary Bettman and the league, for not taking no for an answer, for not just quietly mentioning this, but for going all out and being like, hey, Gary, this is what I think. You got to move these guys over to. And it's true. Pierre Dorian is French-Canadian. You know, it's important to have a French-Canadian manager in there and a coach and, everything else. But I don't know. I think that the league and I can't really foresee the city council in Ottawa holding the National Hockey League back enough that they are not going to try and find a team or try and find a location for them in downtown Ottawa. I just have a hard time, foreseeing that. I just don't foresee that happening. I really, really don't. I don't see that being a thing. But, stranger things have happened, Stranger things certainly have happened. But I think if you put them in Ottawa itself, again, it's Ottawa. That's the other thing. The Senators weren't selling out the Montreal Canadiens games. I mean, how bizarre is that? It's just bizarre what's going on up there. And again, it's a good team. There's flat out no reason for it. I just don't get it. We talked about Seattle being a possibility for the National Hockey League. Gary Bettman, while over at the Global Series, that's what happens with this stuff when you have a big time event. The commissioner and everybody else, they make themselves available. They want to talk about what's going on, state of the league. They get into all that stuff. And that's what Gary Bettman, ESPN, who you could see there on the screen, ESPN.com. Emily Kaplan did a good job at surmising some of Gary Bettman's statements. And on the topic of expansion, she has these three things here that Gary Bettman said about it. And I'll quote Gary, quote, under the right circumstances, maybe we'll consider another expansion, but it is not our manifest destiny as we sit here today. So Gary maintaining the thought of, well, sure, we'd like to expand, but there's no active conversations happening right now. Now, I will say that he did say this while he was actively talking with Bill Foley about putting a team in Vegas. Now, he said it for a bunch prior to that, and it was true, I believe. But then he said it a bunch after, and it was no longer true, and he was still saying it. Like, we're not expanding, when everybody knew full well that it was going on. In fact, if you remember a lot of what happened in the timeline of Vegas, Bill Foley started selling tickets, started the drive, started really, bought a website, started getting the whole thing in motion before Gary Bettman ever came around and was convinced that there was something going on there, even though full well there had been some discussion and conversation. Bill Foley's no idiot. He knows how to go about this. You have a meeting with the commissioner first, and then you go on from there. Now, it wasn't until after a little while that Gary Bettman started saying, sure, we had a meeting, and I told him if you get to the, first thing is first, you got to see if you can get the deposits on the tickets and blah, blah, blah. So they did all that stuff. But, that meeting took place well before, back when Gary Bettman was saying, oh, we're not looking to expand right now, but it's possible one day, so on and so forth. So take that for what it's worth for you. On adding a team to the Western Conference to balance out the conferences with 16 teams each, Gary said, quote, you don't expand just to be symmetrical. That's certainly true. Now, you don't expand just to be symmetrical, but we all know that the most popular destination for the National Hockey League next, or one of the ones that are most appealing with an arena and an ownership group, so on and so forth, is Seattle. We talked about that. The Oakview Group, who is a big time player in the arena world, working on that arena with the Islanders at Belmont. They're the ones who are behind the arena in Seattle, and the fact that they're trying to get that done so that they can lure a National Hockey League team there and lure a basketball franchise back to Seattle, which, let's be honest, Seattle should be a 14 market. They do well with the Seahawks. The Mariners do well. They should have a basketball team, and they should have a hockey team. You got the Portland Trailblazers, you got the Vancouver Canucks, you have very close rivals. The instant rivalry will be built with franchises in those cities. It just really kind of seems to make sense. So, sure, you don't expand just to make things symmetrical, but the fact that an arena is being built and there's an ownership group that's interested will kind of make you not align the league 100% right now. 16 teams apiece versus, what is it now, 17 and 18 or whatever it is. So, or 15 and 16, it's 31, so yeah, sure. You don't have to do it right now, but it does make sense in the future. Take that again for what it's worth. Again, these are things that Gary Bettman has to say. On if there's a short list of potential cities, Gary Bettman says, we're not considering anybody. There are places that are ongoing, that on an ongoing basis that express an interest in having a team. We listen, but we're not doing anything with it. Again, read between the lines here. I mean, he can't come out and be like, oh yeah, we're considering Seattle. And you may be thinking, well, why can't you do that? Well, nothing is definite until it's definite. Nothing is happening until it's happening. If the, ownership group in Seattle falls apart last minute, and now all of a sudden, I don't know, Quebec is or Houston is a more viable option. Now you're on the record, back in 2000, 3 years ago saying, well, you said you were going to go to Seattle, and now everybody in Seattle's pissed. And now all the, Vancouver Canuck fans that are in Seattle, they're like, well, screw this, so that's why you can't say anything until it's essentially done. And you had to go through the process. But I think that the National Hockey League is definitely looking at expanding. I think even if the league is suffering with, unhealthy franchises and bad attendance in certain places, I think even considering the fact that every owner winds up getting a $20-some-odd million payment, you get there's just $20 million towards your bottom line that year. I think the league is definitely interested in expansion. Expansion is the quickest and easiest way to turn a profit in any given year. So no owner is going to sit there and go, are we watering down our product? They're going to go, I can get $20 million for not doing anything. Let's do it. Let's do it. You mean more in the pot for the profit sharing? Do it. You mean they'll get a TV contract and we'll get to share the money and more jersey sales and more tickets sold and more this, more. Do it. Now you can't just expand to 40 cities. The league's never going to do that. But as we've seen with the National Football League, yeah, okay. If the sport is good and is healthy, then do it. Expand. Keep expanding. Because those expansion fees, they're nice. They are really nice down on that bottom line. Nobody's really talking about Houston as a city that can potentially hold a National Hockey League franchise. I think it's missing a big-time owner. I think there's definitely plenty of people with money in the state of Texas, and I think one day there could be such a thing. You have the Houston Rockets. You have the Astros just winning a Super Bowl. You have the Texans down there. They're large enough to be a 4-team city. You do have a college football issue to deal with where that's a really super big deal down there. Baseball is a really super big deal down in Texas. Of course, NASCAR is a big deal down in Texas. You have the, the Bull Riders Association is a big deal in Texas. So you do have like those segments of other things going on, but I think that it's a city that's big enough to sustain a National Hockey League franchise, and I think it needs to be included in the conversation along with Seattle and along with Quebec, who obviously wants one. Don't forget you have Kansas City, who built the arena and convinced the Islanders to come down and play a preseason game down there. They're going to want to bring in a franchise still. I don't know if Kansas City is the type of team that would be healthy enough, a type of city that would be healthy enough to maintain another franchise. Again, they have 3 out of the 4 down there with the Royals and the Chiefs and the, who's the other one? What was I just thinking of? They don't have a basketball team, do they? Oh, no, they don't. The Chiefs and the Royals. Does Kansas City have a basketball team? No, I don't think so. Thank God this is not called a basketball talk show. I'd be embarrassing myself right now. I don't know why I thought Kansas City had a basketball team there for a second. But anyway, they're a multi-league city, so that's certainly a possibility for the National Hockey League. Again, with an arena already there and built. The other part of this too is I think why we're going to talk about expansion a lot is because the league finally got expansion right. They finally got expansion right. Columbus, Nashville, Atlanta, these were disastrous expansion processes. Disastrous. You put really bad teams in these cities and let them figure it out. Just let them flounder for 15 years. Now we're finally seeing it come to fruition with Columbus, who's really good this year. The Preds, going to the Stanley Cup Finals last year. And the fact that Atlanta had to leave, I hope, and we can see it with Vegas. The league finally learned their lesson. You got to give these teams players. You got to have these teams have a chance to win in their first couple of years. They got it right this time. It sucks for the other teams to lose quality players, but look at how good the Vegas thing has turned out for not only Vegas, but the National Hockey League. It's turned out stellar. Stellar. The fact that you open things up so that the league can succeed in expanding in an expansion city in a non-traditional market is tremendous. The reason why Vegas is so good is because all the players are buying into the city. You know what I mean? In the past, players didn't want to go to an expansion franchise because they knew they were going to be terrible for like 3 to 5 years. In the past, the only players that wanted to go to an expansion city were the players that weren't good enough to stay in the lineup in other NHL cities. Now you have a case where look how good Vegas did. It might be a good opportunity for some other players. Really good players are not going to mind going to an expansion city, or not going to mind, being drafted by an expansion team because they know they're not going to sit in the doghouse for 3 to 5 years. It's easier for this time around with Vegas to buy into NHL expansion because they figured out, well, if we give them good players, they'll be good and they won't be terrible. 15, 20 years, Columbus and Nashville suffered through the expansion process of trying to build a franchise. That's how long it takes when you're building something from nothing. Sure, Florida got there a little quicker, but look at Florida, never really recovered after that one, good run that they had early on in their deal. The Tampa Bay Lightning won in what? It was 20 years for them before they won? 04? 10 years? Took them 10 years to be good. It takes a while. Actually, Tampa's a good example. 10 years. They got there relatively quick. 10 or 12 years, I forget. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, they got expansion right this time. They made it so that the players are good. And the team is good. And now the players next time around aren't going to be so, gun shy about having an expansion team come around. And Vegas has so much of a better chance being a successful hockey franchise than, Nashville or Columbus had. I mean, just think of the bad assessment. Think of the league just thought too much of itself that they can put a bad franchise in a market and it was going to be fine. That was a gross mischaracterization, bad self-judgment. They got it right this time around. And by the way, all the players that went to Vegas, the reason why they're playing so good is because they're pissed. James Neal, Marchessault, all these guys, they're pissed. They're pissed they got left unprotected. That's why Vegas is working. So there's a couple of keys for Vegas. Some of the guys are upset they were left unprotected. Marc-Andre Fleury is just one of the most quality world-class athletes you'll ever see. Guy's leaving one of the best teams in the league to go to one of the newest teams in the league, and he had a smile on his face the entire way. Couldn't have been happier about it publicly. And, the third is the team is good. They were given a shot by the league to be better. So that's why expansion works. So Gary can say whatever he wants about expansion. We all know what the deal is. He also expressed, now that we're on the topic of Gary Bettman and what he did to address the league here and during the Global Series, he also addressed the World Cup and the Olympics. On the Olympics, He said that there were a handful of clubs that thought the Olympics were great. There was a handful of clubs bigger that thought that it was too disruptive to the NHL season. And there were some just in the middle. And then when the IOC said that they weren't going to pay the expenses for the players to be there, the reaction was that they needed to reevaluate this. And if they don't value our participation, why are we disrupting our season? Gary Bettman also pointed out something else pretty interesting, saying, quote, "This came down to exposure and being able to promote the fact that we are there. Sidney Crosby's goal in Vancouver, we're not allowed to use that footage. Think about that. Remember the goal that Crosby scored, to give Canada the gold medal in Vancouver? They don't have the rights to that. Even though it's Sidney Crosby, the National Hockey League cannot get the rights to that goal. So, you're sitting there talking about, well, it's good for the league. The league needs to then use these assets that you gain by being in something like this to further promote themselves. And if they can't, then there's no point. On if the NHL would return to the Olympics in the future, Gary Bettman said, quote, 2 responses. One, our league has grown exponentially under Gary Bettman. It is doing so well. Don't just keep going, man. If you want to have some conversations and do little tweaks, figure out a way to make it work. Don't reopen the collective bargaining agreement. Nobody wants to see three stoppages from the National Hockey League in this short amount of time. That would be tremendously it would not be good. It would not be good. That would just be, that's just not good for the league. Not good for the league. Again, if you got to have a little conversations, make some adjustments, do it. But don't scoring. They did one of those tests to see if the league was indeed up on scoring. And I think it's up like 0.3 of a goal this time, from the beginning of the season till about November. Impressive, whatever the number is, but it's going to feel impressive. Case in point, the New Jersey Devils and the Chicago Blackhawks last night, you got 12 goals in that game. 12 goals in that game. That's what I'm talking about, man. That's what I'm talking about. All right, now I knew I was missing some comments here, so my apologies to Tom and Andy on Facebook. Balseal, whatever, that's the guy's name. That's who I was trying to think about, who was trying to scoop up the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Andy writing in, is Casey still in on a hockey team? And did the players buy into Vegas mainly because of the shooting? I said this early on that the shooting, obviously it's a terrible tragedy. I mean, nobody's not counting that. But I think it was something. I brought this up when I was talking about Henrik Lundqvist the other day, too. The terrorist attack that took place in downtown Manhattan was really impactful on Henrik Lundqvist because he lives right there. And find him, it just like you start thinking, holy crap, I hope we're going to find, and there was a bunch of people there that, didn't find their family members and couldn't get in touch with their family members and weren't going to talk to their family members ever again. And then all of a sudden, the Rangers went on a 5-game winning streak. All of a sudden, Henrik Lundqvist is playing like Henrik Lundqvist can play again. And you think to yourself, well, was that because of a tragedy? And I think you'd be naive to think that it wouldn't be, because these things have an impact on you, even from the standpoint, if you could look inside Henrik Lundqvist's head prior to October 31st, he's probably thinking, why can't I play better? What do I have to do? Should I change this? Should I change that? Should I switch my pads? Should I switch my pregame regimen? Should I work harder? Should I skate more? Should I, do this? Should I do that? Whereas when a tragedy happens, you're like, oh my God, is my family okay? Is my wife safe? Are my kids safe? You start to get into all of these things and it just snaps you into reality. And then suddenly you don't really care about your pregame regimen and you're not sitting there overthinking your preparation. And that's super important for any athlete who literally spend all their day thinking about playing hockey, to kind of walk away from that a little bit is a really good thing. So I do think that the tragedy in Vegas did have something. I think it brought that team together a little bit faster. I think that they felt the need to get into the community and do what's right. By the way, I'm going to link in the description this home team documentary that's been going on with Vegas. They've been following Vegas around, and the entire first episode is about the start of the franchise and the players getting there, and then the tragedy happening and how they responded. And you look at this and you see them going, I want to be here for these people. They were just showing up at like blood donation places. Like, I can't give blood. Well, then I'm going to walk around here and I'm going to shake everybody's hand for the next hour, and I'm going to hand out hats and I'm going to take pictures with them, you know. And you had to see some of the people there, first responders, doctors, nurses, people just giving blood, whoever it is, shaking hands, impressed to meet them, saying things like, I don't know hockey, but I know my friend loves hockey, so I got to get a selfie with you so I can show them, you know, stuff like that is all great. It's great for the league. It's great for people just helping people. I think the tragedy does help out in times like that. I think it kind of binds you and brings you together. So, yeah, I think that the shooting, it helped ingrain the team into the city a little bit quicker. By the way, that's the first big major event that happened after the shooting. You know, that was the first thing that the whole city kind of came together on. Again, I always point this out, like that first SNL, for me, that first SNL post 9/11, when Lauren asks Giuliani if it's okay to laugh again, as corny as some may say that was a real moment for me too. You know, that was a moment of like, oh, okay, this is cool. It is okay. Like, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to laugh at SNL again, you know, so that kind of a deal. So I do think that those things do have an impact on the players. But you know, even if that didn't happen, I still think Vegas would be better because for all the reasons I just said, Marc-Andre Fleury is maybe one of the best pros I've ever seen. As far as smile, be there in the community, do and say all the right things. You know, the guy had a move. He left the Stanley Cup team, like all this stuff. He doesn't care. Like he never like, oh, it's unfortunate. I'd rather not go, but I'm gonna nothing. Excited to be here, man. Expansion draft. I'll be there with a smile on my face. I'll put the jersey on. We'll do the whole dog and pony show. It'll be fantastic. You know, all that stuff. And by the way, Tom, I'm excited to be on your podcast and do a cross show there, but I'm waiting on you, man, whenever you want to get down. Is Kansas City still in on a hockey team? Yeah, you don't just sit there with an arena and not be in on a hockey team. Kansas City is forever going to be on a hockey team until A, the arena collapses, or B, they actually get a hockey team. When you build one of these buildings to fill that, the Nashville Predators. I lost myself in that conversation, but that felt good to get all that stuff out. 631-438-1768 if you want to call into the Hockey Talk Show. 631-438-1768. Appreciate the Facebook comments. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this quickly. Paul Kariya going into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So deserving. So glad that he's going in with Teemu Selanne. I think Paul Kariya is super underrated as far as a player goes. I think he's the greatest modern day small guy that we have, small hockey player. And you look at everybody that followed him, Marty St. Louis, Johnny Gaudreau now, you know, your Jason Blakes, your Matt Zuccarellos, all these small guys are thanks to Paul Kariya, because Paul Kariya went in there all short stuff and made it happen on the ice. And by the way, when we talk about the health of the league is a better league. Paul Kariya got the really, you know, crummy end of the stick on this, because if Paul Kariya was around now, he would be dominating the game. The guy's speed and creativity was second to none. He had to deal with getting hit, getting pulled, getting tugged, getting cross-checked to the face, all the concussions. It's a shame. But you look at Paul Kariya, and you've got to give him credit for part of the reason of where the league is today, which is you can't chop anymore. You can't hook anymore. You can't hold a guy up anymore. Because I think the league saw what was happening to guys like Paul Kariya and knew, okay, we need to change. That, along with the economics of the situations and all that other stuff. But you look at where the league is in the mid-90s with Paul Kariya having to retire early because of a concussion, to where the league is right now with Marty St. Louis as of late before he retired, and Johnny Gaudreau and Matt Zuccarello all running around, scoring lots of goals, making it happen. No concussions for these guys. You know, it's where you want to be. Better, younger players, moving faster, being more creative is where the league is going. And we have Paul Kariya to thank for that, because it's tragic what happened to him, having to shorten. I think the league learned something from it and realized, hey, we got to let these little guys find a way to play and not be so protective of the bigger guys who can't play but can hold better, and so on and so forth. By the way, that ties back into what I was saying about the goal scoring. It was only up like 0.3 whatever, but it feels like more. Case in point, the New Jersey Devils and the Chicago Blackhawks. Devils down 4-1. They win the game 7-5. 12 goals in the game. When was the last time you remember a 12-goal game? I don't think I've ever seen a team reach 7 goals more than I have this season. I mean, it's unbelievable how many nights we see one team scoring 7 goals. So again, the increase in actuality is very little, but the perception is the Blackhawks and the Devils just played a 12-goal game. That's impressive. That's exciting. That's entertaining. That's what puts asses into seats. So the league is going in the right direction. And although Paul Kariya, I know, was really upset when he had to retire early, he's got to be happy right now where the league is, where a player like himself, like a Johnny Gaudreau, is thriving. And it's because of his tragic circumstances with the concussions and having to retire, which is why these younger guys are able to go. That's why I think that Johnny Gaudreau should be duking a little bit back to Paul Kariya every month as a tribute. Here you go, Paul. Here's a little for your effort because you couldn't make it because you had the concussions. But look at me flying around, not getting hit at all. And that's all thanks to you, my friend. Here's a couple of loonies for you. Go ahead and go out and get yourself a new surfboard that you like so much. Something Morrison for Sportsnet, I believe, did a nice feature on Paul Kariya. I will try and put it in the comments down below. That's 2 things I have to put in the comments, and I already forgot what the first one was. Oh, yeah, the Vegas thing. I'll get that in there, I promise. Quickly here, a couple other thoughts. You know what? I'm going to save this for another time, but I do want to touch on Nikolai Kulemin. Surgery for the New York Islanders. He is going to be out for 6 months. This coming in pretty much breaking news for us today. Nikolai Kulemin out 6 months after undergoing a successful surgery on an undisclosed upper body injury. Again, the wonderful injury policy of the National Hockey League, where nobody has to disclose anymore what exactly it is that is hurting a player. Now we know that he is out in surgery, and we don't know what he went into surgery for, but we know he's in surgery. 6 months, he's going to be out. Now, look, am I happy that Nikolai Kulemin was hurt and he needs surgery? Of course not. Of course I'm not. Do I think the Nikolai Kulemin injury is a good thing for the New York Islanders? I actually don't. I'd like a healthy Nikolai Kulemin to have in the lineup. Do I think the Nikolai Kulemin injury and surgery helps Doug Weight from making a big mistake that he was going to be making for the next few weeks here? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I think it helps him avoid making the mistake of having 4 fourth-liners play on this team. I made the point on Twitter the other night, and I maintain it to be true. With Kulemin out, or Quine out, or whoever you want to take out of the lineup, Chimera, although I don't agree with it, I like Chimera in the lineup. You now have 3 scoring lines versus 2 scoring lines and 2 checking lines. Case in point, for the Islanders, I'll try and bring up their daily faceoff here because I love the dailyfaceoff.com. I think they do a tremendous job, and I like to plug all the websites that I use on a daily basis to enjoy the National Hockey League, and Daily Faceoff is definitely one of those things. If you take a look at the dailyfaceoff.com, here's the lineup. Lee Tavares, Bailey, scoring line. Eberle, Barzell, Ladd, scoring line. Hosang, Nelson, Chimera, scoring line. Clutterbuck, Zizekas, Quine, checking line. If you take Hosang out of this lineup and you have Nelson, Chimera, and Kulemin in that spot, now you have 2 scoring lines, 2 checking lines. By putting in one player, just by putting in one player, you now change the makeup of your team to have 3 scoring lines and 1 checking line. And by the way, last time I checked, the New Jersey Devils are out there scoring 7 goals against the Stanley Cup champion Chicago Blackhawks. Okay, granted, it was a couple of years ago, but still, same team, still Stanley Cup champions. Now you got them out there. They're running wild because they're letting their horses run. They're letting go. Teams with 3 scoring lines are going to be the teams that win, not teams with 2 and 2. Brock Nelson certainly becomes a third-line checking center when you have Nikolai Kulemin and Jason Chimera on his flanks. Or you have Alan Quine and Nikolai Kulemin. Like, it doesn't really matter. Quine's not a scorer. Ho-Sang makes Nelson better. Nelson makes Ho-Sang better. I love the speed of Jason Chimera on this line. It makes them a fast line, hard to check against. Fast speed. It will open up scoring opportunities. It makes the New York Islanders a better team. 3 scoring lines and 1 checking versus 2 and 2. More scoring opportunities leads to more scoring. More scoring leads to wins. This is a very simple process. Again, it's the pig-headedness, not only of Doug Weight, of coaches in general, that feel 7-5 games are failures. They feel that they're not doing their job. Even if they win a game 7-5, if they give up 5 goals, they feel bad about that. Coaches want to limit defensive mistakes. Coaches want to keep scoring down. Scoring against them, even their own scoring. They'll sacrifice offense to play better on the defensive side of the puck. A coach would much rather win a game 2-1, and a fan would much rather see a game 7-5. That's just basics. That's just basics. So Doug Weight's not going to be happy with this. Just like we saw Mike Babcock. Mike Babcock had the Toronto, they were just running wild, the Leafs. And they were winning a whole slew of games. And what did he do? Pull back on the reins. Now the Toronto Maple Leafs aren't winning as much. It makes a big difference. Vegas. That's part of his thing. He's letting the Vegas Golden Knights skate. He's letting them go. He's not having them sit back. That's why Vegas has gotten off to a good start. By the way, it's not like they haven't evened out. 5-4-1 in their last 10. So they're slightly above 500, and they're 10-5 on the year. But they're still good enough for second place in the Pacific, so who cares? You got to let your guys go. You got to let your team, you got to let them fly. You have to. Toronto's 5-5 after getting off to a great start. They're still second in their Atlantic division, but they're not as good as they were when Babcock was just letting them go. Now, again, Matthews is hurt now. When he comes back, let him go. Nikolai Kulemin, as sad as it is to see a player injury, and again, a lot of the guys who cover the team aren't going to say this because they know Nikolai. It's personal. They like him. I like him too. This is going to make Doug Weight avoid a mistake that he was going to make. Because now there's no reason to keep Ho-Sang out of the lineup. Ho-Sang goes back in the lineup. And the Islanders are going to be better for it. The Islanders are going to be better for it. Now, even if Anthony Beauvillier comes back in and you take Ho-Sang out, I still like Beauvillier, Nelson, and Chimera. It's still a more offensive line. Again, this isn't just solely about Joshua Ho-Sang. It's about keeping your offense in the lineup. Although I do think that Ho-Sang has been a little bit better than Beauvillier this year. Just a little bit. Not that Beauvillier has been bad. It's just that Ho-Sang has been a smidge better. Looks like we're in and around that hour mark, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Got to spend time with the kid. Got to go play with my little guy. And we got a bunch of other stuff. So great show today. Fun talking about all this stuff. I like the idea that the Quebec Nordiques are always sort of around. You know, if you look at the NHL store there, they still sell the Quebec Nordique stuff. They still sell the Hartford Whalers stuff. It's fun to see those things. The Whalers might have the greatest logo of all time, by the way. That might be the greatest logo ever. But the lure of like the Nordiques are always kind of there, always just creeping around a corner, especially if you're Ottawa, is interesting. Good on Don Cherry for calling this out. We are, of course, going to keep our eye on the Ottawa Senators situation and what's happening with their arena. I know that the Quebec people are going to be super interested in that. And we're going to continue to talk hockey, especially in the Metro Division. The Metro Division is getting super interesting now. The Rangers are playing so much, and Tampa just continues to just pile on 8-1-1. Montreal has picked it up even. They're 7-3-0. They're not on the bottom of the list anymore. Looks like Bergevin holding steady was a good move. Carolina, Boston, Buffalo, Florida starting to now slide down. I think Buffalo is in a lot of trouble. I don't foresee them having a good year. I worry about Phil Housley as a first-year coach because I think he has the potential to be a great coach. He was a great player. I just think walking into this Buffalo Sabres team is a little bit troubling. But we have a lot to look at here, a lot of great action that's going on in the league, and I'm excited to talk about it here with you. More exciting. The results aren't showing that. I think their game has been better. So we'll stay up to date with that. Again, if you're on the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio. Hit that favorite button over there. Podbean. Show us some love by liking the podcast there. On YouTube and Facebook. YouTube growth always slower. Facebook, we're up over 300 followers already. And we've only been doing this for a few weeks. I mean, it's kind of insane how big this is building on Facebook and how quickly. You know, I mean, 300 is not, is nothing to be all excited about, but it is a little bit because we had nothing a few weeks ago and now we're up to 300. So you guys are spreading the word. You're sharing the Hockey Talk Show to your friends. You're liking the posts, which some of your friends can see, and then they're liking the page and following the page. So that's awesome. I love the growth. HockeyTalkShow.com for all the information on how to get in touch with the program. You know, that phone number is live every time we are live. We'll be back with another live show tomorrow. I'm kind of liking the 3:30 time slot. I know it's not hugely popular. I think 6 o'clock was better as far as popularity goes, but I think we're gonna get there with the numbers. We're gonna get there and build. It feels like the right time to do it. You know, it's a good time to assess what was happening all day and what is happening. You know, 3 o'clock is around the time that all the players go home and take a nap. So, you know, all is going to be quiet during this time. So we're kind of right in there where we can tell you what's happened and then tell you what we think is going to happen tonight. So I think we're going to try and stick with the 3:30, 4 o'clock time frame tomorrow, but we'll put the updates on Facebook and YouTube. We schedule them now so that you guys can see in advance when we're going to be on. So drop your comments, look for the Vegas video in the comments, and I'll